Welcome back, everyone, to a new story. We really hope you enjoy it. So, what if I told you to put on a dress and be my girlfriend on the hockey team? The question hung in the air, sharp and surreal. As I took a sip of my morning coffee, I nearly choked. The hot liquid scalded the back of my throat, and I sputtered, setting the mug down with a clatter that seemed to echo in the sudden silence of our small kitchen. I looked at Kirsty, my girlfriend of 3 years, the woman I loved, the fierce captain of the city's women's hockey team. A laugh bubbled up from my chest, a deep, rolling sound that felt very, very male. You're kidding. Right, that's a new one. Even for you. But she wasn't smiling. Her blue eyes, usually sparkling with mischief, were dead serious. They were fixed on me, searching, pleading. The laugh died in my throat. Wait, you're not kidding. Kirsty leaned forward, her elbows on the worn oak table between us. Her blonde ponytail swished with the movement. Ben, I'm desperate. You know Megan broke her ankle in practice yesterday. It was bad. She's out for the season, and the championships are in 3 weeks. I knew all of this. I had been the one to drive Kirsty home from the hospital, her face pale with worry for her teammate and her team. I know, babe. It's awful. But you'll find a replacement. There has to be someone. There isn't, she said, her voice flat. The league deadline for roster changes was last week. We can only bring someone in on an emergency clause if they're a new transfer into the area. And we've called everyone, every club, every college team within 100 miles. Nothing. We're going to have to forfeit 3 years of work down the drain because of one bad fall. I felt a pang of sympathy. I was a professional hockey player myself. On the men's team, I understood the dedication, the sweat, the brotherhood, or in her case, sisterhood. The thought of having to bow out of a championship run was gut-wrenching. I reached across the table and took her hand. I'm so sorry. Kirsty, I wish there was something I could do. Her grip tightened on mine. There is, she whispered, and her eyes flickered with a strange, intense light. That's what I'm trying to tell you. I pulled my hand back slowly, a sense of unease creeping up my spine. What are you talking about? I can't just put on a wig and play. They'd know in 2 seconds. I'm 6'2", 200 pounds of muscle. My voice could start a lawnmower. That's where you're wrong, she said, her excitement growing, chasing away the despair. I know a place. It's experimental, high-tech. They make these full-body suits, bodysuits. They're not just foam padding and silicone. Ben, they use some kind of dynamic compression technology. It can literally reshape a person's silhouette, squeeze muscle, narrow bones, create curves. It's undetectable. I stared at her, my mind struggling to process the words. It sounded like science fiction, a suit that turns a man into a woman. Kirsty, that's crazy. It's real, she insisted. I saw a demo last year at a tech expo. It's mostly used in undercover work or for actors, super high-end stuff, but it exists. And the person who runs the studio owes my dad a favor. The idea was so outlandish, so utterly preposterous, that a part of me was tempted to just laugh it off again. But another part, a smaller, quieter part I rarely acknowledged, felt a strange flutter of something. Curiosity nerves, I couldn't tell. Even if this magic suit exists, I argued, grasping for logic, what about my face, my voice, The suit comes with a hyper-realistic silicone mask that blends seamlessly at the neck. A micro-vocalizer worn on the throat changes your voice. And the other part is handled by the suit's compression design. It flattens everything, very securely. She said it all so matter-of-factly, as if she were listing off grocery items. I shook my head, standing up to pace the kitchen. The linoleum was cool under my bare feet. No way. It's insane. It's cheating. Is it, she countered, standing to face me. We're not using it to get an unfair advantage. We're using it to not forfeit, to keep our dream alive. You have the skills, Ben. You're one of the best skaters I know. If we could just change the packaging. She stepped closer, placing her hands on my chest, I could feel their warmth through my t-shirt. "Think about it," she murmured, her voice dropping to a persuasive, intimate tone. "You wouldn't be Ben. You'd be someone new. We'd call you Hazel. You'd be this hot, mysterious girl who came out of nowhere, a lightning fast forward with legs for days. No one would ever guess. Hazel." The name landed strangely in my mind. It felt soft, unfamiliar. I looked down at Kirsty, at the desperate hope in her eyes. I loved her. I would do almost anything for her. But this felt like stepping off a cliff into an unknown world. My whole life had been defined by my masculinity, the strength, the aggression on the ice, the camaraderie in the men's locker room. To shed all of that, even temporarily, it was terrifying. And yet, that terrifying feeling was mingled with a thrill. What would it be like to move differently, to be seen differently, to be Hazel? My heart started to pound in my chest, a heavy, frantic rhythm. I couldn't tell if it was from fear of the unknown or excitement for it. Maybe it was both. I looked from Kirsty's pleading face to the window, where the morning sun was casting long shadows. My life was here, in this kitchen, as Ben, solid, predictable, known. She was asking me to step out of it, into a world of lace and stockings, of a different name and a different body. It was the craziest, most reckless idea I had ever heard. I took a deep breath, the air feeling thin in my lungs. "Okay," I heard myself say. The word a quiet surrender. "Okay, I'll do it." Kirsty's face broke into a smile so wide and brilliant it was like the sun had come indoors. She threw her arms around my neck, and I held her, my mind reeling. My heart was hammering against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat signaling the start of a journey I couldn't possibly comprehend. I was doing this to help Kirsty, I told myself. That was the main reason, but as I held her, I couldn't deny the other, more selfish reason, a deep, unsettling, and electrifying curiosity to meet the woman in the mirror, to meet Hazel. The shop wasn't on a main street. It was tucked away in a converted warehouse district, the kind of place with no signs, just a discreet number on a frosted glass door. Kirsty held my hand as we walked up, her grip reassuringly tight. Mine was slick with sweat. "You ready for this?" she whispered. "Not even a little bit," I confessed. The door buzzed open before we even knocked, and we stepped inside. The interior was a shock. I had expected a sterile, lab-like environment, but it was more like a high-fashion couturier's atelier mixed with a Hollywood special effects studio. Mannequins stood draped in shimmering skin-like fabrics, and chrome racks held bodysuits in every shade of human skin. The air smelled faintly of silicone and expensive perfume. A woman emerged from a back room. She was ageless, with sharp, intelligent eyes, silver hair pulled back in an elegant twist, and a crisp white lab coat over a stylish black dress. She moved with an unnerving grace. "Kirsty, my dear," she said, her voice a low, cultured purr, "and this must be our athlete." She looked me up and down, not with judgment, but with the cool, appraising eye of an artist studying a block of marble. "I'm Madame Eve. A pleasure. Come, Ben, let's see what we have to work with." She led me to a circular platform in the center of the room, surrounded by scanners and cameras. "Strip down to your underwear, please." My face burned. In a men's locker room. It was nothing. Here, under her analytical gaze and Kirsty's watchful eyes. It felt intensely vulnerable. I complied, my movements stiff and awkward. I stood there in my boxers, feeling like a side of beef on display. I was all hard lines and bulky muscle, a roadmap of years spent in the gym and on the ice. Yes, a fine specimen of masculinity," Madame Eve commented, circling the platform. "This will be a delightful challenge. Now, Kirsty, the vision. Tell me about Hazel." Kirsty stepped forward, her creative energy taking over. She needs to be athletic, of course, slender, but with toned muscles, not bulky, long. Lean legs are a must. For height, maybe 5'10", shave off a few inches from Ben. As for measurements, let's go with a modest but definite C cup, a 27-inch waist, and 36-inch hips. We want her to look like a skater, not a model, and her skin should be fair. A few freckles across the nose, maybe. Madame Eve nodded, tapping commands into a tablet. Lasers flickered over my body, taking thousands of precise measurements, excellent choices, and the face. Kirsty looked at me, a soft smile on her lips. Keep his good bone structure, but soften it. A slightly smaller nose, fuller lips, and big, expressive eyes. Green, I think. Hazel should have green eyes. An hour later, Madame Eve returned with a sleek, flesh-toned garment. It looked impossibly small, like something designed for a child. This is the base layer, she explained. Step into it. Getting it on was a struggle. The material was cool and slick, but incredibly restrictive. It clung to me, compressing every inch of my body. It was tight, but bearable. I looked in the mirror. I was still me, just smoother, tucked in. Now for the transformation, Madame Eve said, her eyes glinting. She tapped her tablet, activating primary compression sequence. This will be uncomfortable. Uncomfortable was the understatement of the century. A deep, powerful pressure began to build around me, as if I were being squeezed by a giant python. It started at my core and radiated outwards. My thick, muscular thighs felt like they were being put in a vise, the muscle compacting, elongating. My waist cinched in with a gasp-inducing force, and my broad shoulders were pulled inward, the bones groaning in protest. I cried out, a sharp, involuntary yelp of pain. My entire body was being forcibly remolded, my masculine frame being crushed and reshaped into something alien. Breathe, Ben, Kirsty said, her voice a distant anchor in the sea of sensation. Just breathe through it. I squeezed my eyes shut, sweat beading on my forehead. The pressure intensified, focusing on my chest, pushing tissue upwards, creating volume where there had been nothing but flat pectoral muscle. My hips were forced outward, creating a curve that felt profoundly wrong and yet strangely right. The pain was immense, a deep structural ache, but just as I thought I couldn't take any more, it began to subside, leaving behind a humming, tingling sensation. You can look now, Madame Eve said softly. I opened my eyes, my breath catching in my throat. Staring back at me from the full-length mirror was a stranger, a woman. She was tall and slender, with the toned, athletic build Kirsty had described. Her shoulders were narrow, her waist nipped in, and her hips flared into a gentle curve. My legs, my powerful, tree-trunk legs, were now long, shapely, and decidedly feminine. I lifted a hand, and the woman in the mirror lifted hers. The skin was smooth, pale, and completely hairless. It was my body, but it wasn't. It was Hazel's. It was the mask, Madame Eve announced, approaching with a delicate, lifelike face of silicone. It was attached to the bodysuit's high collar. She carefully fitted it over my head, the material cool against my skin. It settled into place, and suddenly, my face was gone. In its place was the face of a pretty girl with high cheekbones, full lips, and startlingly green eyes that blinked when I blinked. I opened my mouth to speak, but no sound came out. The vocalizer, Madame Eve said, pressing a small, skin-colored patch to my throat. Now say something. Hello. I tried, my vocal cords feeling stiff. Hello, I croaked. The voice that came out was not my own. It was a clear, pleasant alto, feminine and light. Hearing it was almost as jarring as seeing the new face. The transformation was complete. I was no longer Ben. I was a construct, a fabrication. But the reflection staring back at me was undeniably real. One last thing, Kirsty said, her eyes shining. She was holding a small, delicate pile of white fabric to complete the look. She handed me a white lace bra, a pair of matching satin panties, and a garter belt with a pair of sheer, thigh-high white stockings. My hands trembled as I took them. The materials felt alien in my calloused fingers. Turning away from the mirror, my face flushed with a heat that had nothing to do with the suit's compression. I fumbled with the lingerie. The bra was a puzzle of straps and clasps. Kirsty had to help me, her fingers brushing against the new, sensitive skin of my back. The feeling sent a shiver through me. The lace cups felt soft and slightly scratchy against the newly formed breasts of the suit. The satin of the panties was cool and silky as I pulled them up my long legs, settling against my compressed anatomy in a way that was both strange and incredibly intimate. But it was the stockings that did me in. I sat on the edge of the platform to roll them on. The sheer nylon slid over my skin. A whisper-soft caress from my ankle all the way up to my mid-thigh. The sensation was electric. 1,000 tiny nerve endings I never knew I had suddenly firing at once. I attached the garters, the little clips a final, definitive touch. I stood up and looked in the mirror again. The lingerie was mostly hidden, but the lacy tops of the white stockings peeked out from under the hem of the bodysuit, seeing them on those long feminine legs. My legs sent a jolt through my system. I was wearing women's underwear, and a part of me, a deep, hidden part, was utterly mesmerized by it. "Hazel," Kirsty said softly, testing the name. I shivered, a full-body tremor. It was as if her voice had called a new person into existence. Ben was the man who felt pain and confusion. But Hazel was the beautiful woman in the mirror, with green eyes and long legs in white stockings, and in that moment, looking at her, my heart gave a lurch of something that felt terrifyingly like recognition. The next few days were a blur of intense, surreal training. Being Hazel wasn't just about wearing the suit. It was a full-time performance, and Kirsty was my demanding director. "Stop walking like you're about to check someone into the boards," she'd command as I stomped through our living room. "Your center of gravity is lower now. Hips, Hazel. Move from your hips." I'd try again, forcing a sway that felt ridiculous, but she'd nod in approval. "Better. Now, let's work on sitting." It turned out there was an entire art to sitting down in a skirt, something I'd never considered. Knees together, a graceful descent, a subtle adjustment of the fabric. It was exhausting. She taught me how to talk, not just with the vocalizer, but with feminine inflections, to use my hands more when I spoke, to make eye contact in a way that was engaging, not challenging. She taught me how to manage the long brown wig we'd bought, the way the synthetic strands would catch on things, the constant need to flick it back over my shoulder. And then there was makeup. Kirsty sat me down in front of her vanity, an intimidating arsenal of brushes, powders, and colors spread out before us. Just a little, she'd said, to look natural. She showed me how to apply foundation to even out the silicone mask's tone, a touch of blush on the apples of my new cheeks, mascara to make the green eyes pop. The first time she did it, I felt like a clown. But when I looked in the mirror, the effect was subtle, transformative. It made Hazel look less like a doll and more like a real, living woman. The physical adjustment was a constant challenge. The breasts, while not huge, were a constant presence. They got in the way when I tried to run. A soft, jiggling weight that threw off my balance, the bodysuit, while allowing for athletic movement, made me feel perpetually contained, squeezed. And the stockings were my nemesis and my guilty pleasure. They were unbelievably delicate. On the second day, I snagged a pair on the corner of the coffee table, a long, ugly run appearing in the sheer fabric. A wave of genuine disappointment washed over me. Kirsty just laughed and pulled another pair from a drawer. "Welcome to my world," she said. "Buy them in bulk." Despite the frustration, the feeling of the smooth nylon against my legs was a constant, distracting hum of sensation. When I wore a skirt for practice walking, the feeling of a breeze on my thighs, filtered through the thin material, was a completely new and startling experience. On the ice, things were both better and worse. The first time I stepped onto the rink as Hazel, I felt like a newborn foal. My balance was shot. My center of gravity had shifted. and my powerful, familiar skating stride was gone. I was all wobbly ankles and flailing arms. But Kirsty was patient. "Your old strengths won't work here," she explained, skating circles around me. "You can't power through people anymore. You're smaller, lighter. You have to be faster, more agile." She was right. After a few days of frustrating falls and near misses, something clicked. I started to use the new body's advantages. I was quicker on my turns, my lighter frame allowing me to pivot with astonishing speed. My stick handling, always a strength, became even more precise. I could deke and weave through cones with a newfound nimbleness that Ben, with his bulky frame, could never have managed. The body was different, but the hockey sense, the instincts I'd honed over 2 decades, were still there. Hazel was starting to look like a real player. Off the ice, our dynamic was shifting in ways I didn't know how to handle. Kirsty seemed to delight in my new persona. She'd lean in close to fix my hair, her fingers lingering at the nape of my neck. She'd adjust the strap of my bra, which always seemed to be slipping off my new, narrower shoulder, her touch light and teasing. One evening, I was struggling to zip up a simple dress she'd asked me to wear for ambiance. My fingers felt clumsy. She came up behind me, her hands confidently taking over, as she slowly pulled the zipper up my back. She leaned in and whispered in my ear, "You have amazing legs, Hazel, especially in those stockings." My face went beet red. I was flustered, embarrassed, and undeniably pleased. Being complimented as a man was about being strong, tough, skilled. Being complimented as a woman, as Hazel, was about being beautiful, attractive. It hit a different nerve, one I hadn't known existed, and the validation was intoxicating. At night, after Kirsty was asleep, I'd find myself standing in front of the full-length mirror on our closet door. I'd take off my regular clothes, Ben's clothes, and just look. Hazel would stare back at me, dressed only in her delicate white lingerie. I'd run a hand down my side, tracing the curve of the hip the suit created. I'd touch the soft lace of the bra. My heart would start to beat in that strange, rapid way again. It was a chaotic mix of emotions. I was Ben, a man, a pro athlete, looking at a reflection of a woman, but I was also in that body. I was the one feeling the satin against my skin, the one seeing the world through those green eyes. The line between us was blurring. One night, a question floated up from the deepest, most confusing part of my mind. A question so shocking I barely dared to form the words. I looked at Hazel's reflection, at her pretty, uncertain face, and I whispered it into the silent room. Do I even want to go back to being Ben? The question hung there, unanswered, terrifying, and more thrilling than any goal I'd ever scored. The day Kirsty introduced me to the team, my stomach was a knot of pure anxiety. We walked into the locker room, and the loud, boisterous chatter of a dozen women died down as all eyes turned to me. "Everyone, this is Hazel," Kirsty announced, her voice full of confidence I did not feel. "She's a friend of mine from out of town, just transferred here. She's going to be filling in for Megan for the rest of the season." A chorus of greetings and welcomes followed. A tall, friendly-looking defender with a bright red ponytail named Sarah came right up and shook my hand. "Great to have you, Hazel. We were in a real bind. You play forward." "I do," I said, my new voice sounding surprisingly steady, mostly wing. "Awesome. I'm Sarah. Don't mind Megan over there," she said, nodding towards a girl with sharp features and skeptical eyes. "She's our goalie. She doesn't trust anyone until they've proven they can score on her." I gave a small smile, trying to look as unassuming as possible. My strategy was to keep my head down, play well, and avoid drawing any attention. That strategy lasted until the first 5 minutes of practice. Kirsty put me on her line, and on our first rush, she fed me a perfect pass. I took it on my stick, saw an opening, and accelerated. The agility I'd been discovering kicked in. I deked past one defender, used a quick burst of speed to get around another, and found myself one-on-one with Megan, the skeptical goalie. Old instincts took over. I faked a shot to the left, and when she bit, I pulled the puck back and snapped a wrist shot into the top right corner of the net. The puck hit the back bar with a satisfying ping. The rink went silent for a second. Then a few of the girls let out low whistles. Sarah slapped my shoulder pad. Okay, the new girl can play. From that moment on, I wasn't just the quiet newcomer. I was Hazel, the secret weapon. The initial awkwardness I felt around the team began to melt away. They were impressed by my skills on the ice, and that respect carried over into the locker room. They accepted me, and the locker room was a world unto itself. It was so different from the men's room, which was all loud music, aggressive jokes, and the smell of stale sweat. Here, the air was filled with the scent of shampoo and body spray. The talk wasn't about conquests and cars. It was about everything else. They talked about bad dates, annoying professors, the new season of a popular TV show, and they talked about things that made Ben, the man inside the suit, blush furiously, while Hazel just had to nod and pretend to understand. Oh my God, you have to see this new bralette I got, a girl named Chloe said one day, pulling a beautiful piece of dark blue lace from her bag. It's so comfortable, and it makes you feel so sexy, you know. The other girls chimed in, discussing their favorite brands of lingerie, the eternal struggle between comfort and style, the merits of satin versus cotton. I felt a pang of panic. This was territory I couldn't possibly navigate. I just murmured something non-committal, but the conversation stuck with me, for them. These items, bras, panties, stockings weren't just a costume. They were a part of their identity, a source of confidence and personal expression. I started to feel a strange sort of camaraderie. After practice, we'd all sit around, stretching and laughing, and I would feel a sense of belonging that was different, more intimate than what I felt with my male teammates. I was one of the girls. I had to constantly remind myself that it was all an act, a deception. But the longer I spent as Hazel, the less it felt like a lie. The real turning point came one evening after a particularly grueling practice. The locker room was steamy from the showers, and most of the team had already left. It was just me and Kirsty, sitting on the bench opposite each other, still in our gear. We were both tired, quiet. I was pulling off my skates, my fingers fumbling with the laces. Kirsty was just watching me, a strange, unreadable expression on her face. "You were incredible out there today," she said softly. "Thanks," I replied, my Hazel voice a little hoarse. "That new drill was a killer." "It's not just that," she said, getting up and moving to sit beside me on the bench. The space between us felt charged. "It's everything. The way you move, the way the team looks at you. They adore you." I didn't know what to say to that, so I just kept my eyes on my skate laces. Kirsty reached out and tucked a stray strand of my brown wig behind my ear. Her fingers were warm against the cool silicone of my mask. She let her hand linger there, her thumb gently stroking my cheekbone. "You know," she whispered, her voice barely audible over the hum of the ventilation system, "Ben, or you, Hazel, you look so pretty it makes me jealous." My head snapped up, my green eyes meeting her blue ones. Her expression was one of genuine, raw emotion. It was wonder and sadness and something else I couldn't name. Before I could process it, before I could even think, she leaned in and pressed her lips to my cheek. It wasn't a romantic kiss, not the way she kissed Ben. It was softer, more hesitant, a kiss of awe, of confusion, of farewell. We both pulled back, our eyes wide, the air crackled. The world seemed to tilt on its axis. In that one small, quiet moment, I knew our old relationship was over. Ben and Kirsty, the couple, were gone, and in their place were Hazel and Kirsty, two teammates sitting in a locker room, their hearts beating a frantic, complicated rhythm that neither of them understood. We sat there in silence for a long time, the unspoken truth hanging between us, as heavy and real as the championship trophy we were fighting for. The tournament arrived like a tidal wave, the energy, the pressure, the roar of the crowds. It was all familiar territory for Ben, the pro, but for Hazel, the rookie, it was a baptism by fire. With every game, the stakes got higher, and so did my profile. The mysterious new forward for the Vipers was becoming the talk of the league. Announcers praised my speed, my stick handling, my uncanny ability to be in the right place at the right time. I lived and breathed as Hazel. I woke up, squeezed into the suit, became her, and didn't shed the persona until I collapsed into bed late at night. The line between my two selves was so blurred it had practically disappeared. When someone yelled, "Hazel," on the ice, my head turned without a second thought. When the girls and I went out for a team dinner, I found myself laughing and gossiping with an ease that felt completely natural. Ben was a fading memory, a suit of clothes hanging in a closet I no longer opened. Kirsty and I had found a new, unspoken rhythm. We were a formidable duo on the ice, our chemistry seamless. Off the ice, a tender, careful distance had grown between us. The easy physical intimacy we'd shared as a couple was gone, replaced by lingering looks, supportive smiles, and the occasional gentle touch on the arm. We were best friends, confidants, and co-conspirators in the biggest lie of our lives. It was painful, but it was also beautiful in its own strange way. We blazed through the early rounds of the tournament, our team playing with a confidence I hadn't seen before. I was the offensive spark, but they were the heart and soul. We won our quarterfinal, then a nail-biter of a semifinal that went into overtime, and then we were there, the championship game. The arena was packed, a roaring sea of noise and color. The pressure was immense. The game was a brutal, back-and-forth battle. We were tied 2-2 with less than a minute to play in the final period. My legs burned, my lungs ached, and the bodysuit felt like a cage of hot, compressed muscle. Kirsty got the puck in our zone and made a desperate clearing pass. I saw it coming. I pushed off, my legs pumping with the last dregs of my energy. I was flying. I caught the puck at center ice, with only one defender between me and the goalie. I could hear the crowd screaming, a deafening roar that vibrated through my skates. I faked left, the defender bought it, and I cut right, blowing past her. It was just me and the goalie. Time seemed to slow down. I saw the opening, top shelf, glove side. I didn't think. I just shot. The puck flew from my stick, a black blur against the white ice. It went in. The red light flashed. The buzzer sounded. The arena exploded. My teammates swarmed me, a joyful pile of sweat and padding. They were screaming my name. Hazel, Hazel. You did it. Hazel. I was laughing and crying at the same time, the emotion overwhelming. We had done it. We were champions. As Kirsty hugged me, lifting me off the ice in a surge of pure joy, I felt a happiness so profound, so complete, that it eclipsed any victory I had ever had as Ben. This felt more real, more earned. This was my victory, Hazel's victory. Later, amidst the celebration and the flash of cameras, as we were accepting the trophy, a man in a sharp suit approached me. He had an air of authority, his eyes sharp and assessing. "Hazel," he asked, his voice calm and professional. "My name is Aaron Peters. I'm a scout for the women's national team." My heart stopped. The joyous noise of the celebration faded into a dull hum. He held out a business card. His name and the official team logo were embossed in gold. "I've been watching you all tournament. You're a phenomenal talent, the best I've seen come up in years. Your speed, your hockey IQ. It's a rare combination." He paused, letting his words sink in. "We want you to try out for the team. We think you have the potential to go all the way." I stared at the card in my hand, the smooth, crisp edges feeling impossibly heavy. The national team. It was the ultimate dream for any athlete. An opportunity to represent your country, to play at the highest possible level. But to accept it meant the lie would have to become the truth. It wouldn't just be for a few weeks to help Kirsty. It would mean living as Hazel, full-time, in the public eye. It would mean letting Ben die, not just in my own mind, but to the entire world. It was a one-way ticket, a door that once walked through could never be reopened. I looked from the business card to Kirsty, who was watching me from a few feet away. Her face a mixture of pride and terror. She knew exactly what this meant. The roar of the crowd chanting my name, Hazel's name, filled my ears. A scout for the national team wanted me, not Ben, the powerful male player. He wanted Hazel, the swift, agile woman who had just scored the biggest goal of her life. He wanted the person I had become. The weight of the choice was crushing. My head swam, and for the first time, I felt like the mask on my face was suffocating me. The days following the championship win were a strange, hollow purgatory. The trophy sat on our mantelpiece, gleaming and triumphant, but it felt like a monument to my impossible dilemma. The bodysuit stayed in its case. I walked around our apartment as Ben, in my old sweats and t-shirts, but it felt like I was the one wearing a costume now. My own skin felt foreign. My deep voice sounded grating and wrong in my ears. I'd catch my reflection in the toaster and feel a jolt of shock. That broad-shouldered, square-jawed man wasn't me. Not anymore. I couldn't eat. I couldn't sleep. Aaron's business card sat on my nightstand. A constant, silent accusation. I had a week to call him. A week to decide which life to live and which to kill. I tried to reason with myself. This was insane. I was a man. I had a life as Ben, a career, friends, a family who knew me as their son, their brother. To become Hazel permanently would mean constructing an elaborate web of lies that would eventually collapse. It would mean giving up everything and everyone I had ever known. But then I'd close my eyes, and I would be back on the ice. I'd feel the lightness in my stride, the thrill of weaving through opponents, the incredible, soul-shaking joy of that final goal. I'd remember the easy camaraderie in the locker room, the feeling of Sarah's friendly slap on my back, the shared laughter over something as simple as a new nail polish color. I'd remember Kirsty's whispered compliment, the feel of her lips on my cheek. Those weren't Ben's memories. They belonged to Hazel, and they were the most vibrant, most authentic memories I had. Finally, on the 6th day, I couldn't take it anymore. The silence was eating me alive. I picked up my phone and called Kirsty. She was at her parents' house for the afternoon. She answered on the first ring, Ben. "Hey," I said, my voice thick. It felt like I was pushing the sound through gravel. "Have you decided?" she asked softly. Tears pricked my eyes. "No, I don't know what to do. Kirsty, my head is a mess. I feel like I'm losing my mind." I confessed everything, the confusion, the fear, the terrifying, exhilarating feeling of being Hazel, the emptiness of being Ben. I told her how right it felt, and how that rightness scared me more than anything. She was quiet for a long time on the other end of the line. I could hear her breathing, slow and steady. I thought maybe she had hung up. Then she spoke, her voice clear and full of a sad, profound certainty. "I've known for a while, Ben. Known what I asked," my voice cracking. "That this wasn't just a game for you," she said. "I saw it the first time you looked in the mirror at Madame Eve's. There was shock. Yeah, but there was something else, too. Recognition, and I've seen it every day since. When you're Hazel, you're lighter. Your eyes sparkle. You laugh more freely. I don't just mean the vocalizer, I mean you, the person inside. You've never looked happier. Not in the whole time I've known you." Her words were like a key turning in a lock I didn't even know was there. A sob broke from my chest, raw and painful. She was right. She was so completely, devastatingly right. "Maybe," she continued, her own voice thick with emotion, "Ben was the mask you were wearing all along, and this suit, this crazy plan, it just gave you permission to finally take it off. Maybe Hazel isn't a character you're playing. Maybe Hazel is who you really are." We both cried then. We cried for the end of Ben and Kirsty, for the love we had and the future we were losing. We cried for the pain and confusion and the terrifying beauty of this unexpected truth. It was a conversation that broke my heart and, at the same time, pieced it back together in a new and honest shape. When we finally hung up, it was no longer as lovers. We were something deeper now. We were the only two people on earth who knew the whole story. We were family. I sat in the quiet of my apartment for a long time. Then, with steady hands, I stood up and walked to the closet. I took out the case, opened it, and began the familiar ritual. I stepped into the suit, the cool material embracing my skin like a long-lost friend. I activated the compression, feeling the familiar, painful then perfect pressure reshaping me, molding me into my true form. I fitted the mask, attached the vocalizer. I dressed, not in a uniform, but in a simple skirt and blouse. And then the final, essential pieces, the white lace bra, its delicate pattern of familiar comfort, the matching satin panties, cool and smooth, and last, the sheer white stockings, sliding up my long legs, the nylon whispering against my skin. I clipped the garters into place, the small satisfying clicks sealing my decision. I walked to the full-length mirror and looked at the woman staring back at me. Her green eyes were red-rimmed from crying, but they were clear. For the first time, there was no conflict in her gaze, no confusion. There was only acceptance. I picked up my phone and dialed the number on Aaron Pita's business card. As it rang, I reached up and adjusted the lace strap of my bra, a small automatic gesture of self-possession. I smoothed the sheer fabric of the stocking on my thigh. A man's voice answered, "Aaron Peters." I took a breath and smiled at my reflection, a real, genuine smile that reached my eyes. "Mr. Peters," I said, my voice clear and confident, "this is Hazel. I'm calling about your offer."